Long ago, the small village of Agimo sat beside a big winding river. The river gave life to the village by providing water for drinking, washing, and growing crops. But the elders warned to never go near the dark, still waters of the Yoku, the forbidden river, which flowed into the main river. Bad spirits lived there, they said, and any who went close would be cursed. Aiza was a pretty young girl of 15-year-old. She had long black braids, dark eyes that sparkled like the morning sun on the river, and a smile that could light up even the darkest spaces. Aiza helped her mother fetch water each morning from the well near their hut. One bright morning, as they walked to the well, Aiza's mother stopped suddenly. She gasped and pointed to the path ahead. A massive snake as big around as a grown man's body was stretched across the path, eyes shut tight. "Back away slowly, Aiza," her mother whispered. "Do not wake it." But Aiza did not fear snakes. She had been taught they were guardians of the earth. So she walked right up to the giant snake and with a soft voice said, "Good morning, friend. We mean you no harm." The snake's eyes shot open, black as night. Aiza and her mother froze. But then the great snake simply gave a slight nod and slithered off the path into the bushes on the other side. From that day, Aiza had a special connection to snakes. They would sometimes follow her on her walks, silently slithering behind like scaly shadows. She would speak softly to them, and they seemed to understand. The other villagers first feared the snakes, but then came to see them as protectors when they were around Aiza. One morning when Aiza was 16 years old, she went to the well for water as usual. But this time, her snake friends did not follow. When she neared the well, she was startled to see one of the elders standing guard. "Why are you here, Elder Karim?" Aiza asked. The old man frowned. "I was stationed here to stop any from drawing water until the river can be checked." "Checked? Why? What has happened?" Elder Karim stroked his long, grey beard. "During the night, something troubled the waters of the Yoku, the forbidden river. When the first rays of sun hit it this morning, the waters turned a deep crimson red, like blood. We fear some great evil has cursed it." Aiza glanced over at the rivers. The muddy main river looked normal, but the small offshoot, the Yoku, did indeed glow a deep, unnatural shade of red in the morning light, like hot molten lava. "I must see it," Aiza said. She started walking towards the forbidden river. "No, child," Elder Karim called, hurrying to block her path. "The Yoku is strictly forbidden. That is why we station elders here when it shows signs of danger. Get back to your hut until we solve this." But Aiza would not be stopped. There was a power calling her to the river, like an invisible root tugging her forward. "Do not worry, Elder. I will be safe," she said with a calm, assured voice that did not sound like it came from a 16-year-old girl. Elder Karim looked deeply troubled, his wrinkled face lined with fear. But he merely shook his head and stepped aside, making a hand sign to ward off evil. Aiza smiled and continued down the narrow path towards the Yoku. As she walked, snakes of all sizes slithered out from the bushes to follow her, forming an undulating, scaly parade line. The little girl who could speak to snakes. When Aiza reached the banks of the forbidden river, the water seemed to glow even brighter, like a brilliant red veil had been thrown over its surface. The snake stopped and simply watched. Aiza stood motionless for a long while, looking out over the crimson river. Then she began chanting in a strange language that did not sound like the common tongue of the villagers. It sounded ancient, powerful, and almost inhuman. As she chanted, the red river waters began swirling and bubbling. Suddenly, a form rose from the depths, a human-looking figure, but with the lower body of a massive fish covered in thick green scales. A mermaid. The other villagers, who had gathered behind Elder Karim to watch from a safe distance, began screaming and running in fright. But Aiza did not even flinch. She locked eyes with the mermaid and kept chanting. The mermaid was male, with a muscular human upper body, green, scaly skin, and sharp, finned ears. It hissed and slithered fully from the river onto the bank. Then it reared up its massive fishtail and let out a deafening roar that shook the ground. At that moment, all the snakes turned and struck. As one, the whole parade slithered toward the mermaid with mouths wide and fangs bared. But with a sweep of its powerful tail, the mermaid swatted them all away like blades of grass. Aiza chanted louder and pointed an accusing finger at the mermaid. It let out another ear-piercing roar, sounding more animal than human. Then, it charged straight at her. Back at the village, the screams had caused every man to grab a spear or blade. They rushed towards the river, fearing the worst for Aiza. "Kill the mermaid! Protect the girl!" Elder Karim shouted. When they arrived, their eyes bulged at the sight of the snake army surrounding the massive mermaid as it loomed over Aiza. The mermaid raised a clawed hand to strike. But with one final chant, Aiza threw her arms up at the mermaid, and it froze in place, as still as a statue. The snakes instantly relaxed and slithered away into the bushes. No one said a word. Aiza walked up to the frozen mermaid, now just as tall as she was, and placed her hands on its scaly chest. The mermaid's eyes went wide, and its jaws opened in a silent roar. Then Aiza did something that made every man's jaw drop. She leaned in and pressed her lips to the mermaid's in a deep, passionate kiss. The whole village watched in shock as Aiza kissed the terrifying mermaid creature for what seemed like an eternity. When she finally pulled away, the mermaid's eyes rolled back in its head, and it slumped over unconscious. Aiza simply turned and began walking calmly back towards the village. The crimson river water faded back to normal. What sorcery is this?" Elder Karim gasped when she drew near. Aiza looked up at him with those enchanting, innocent eyes. "Fear not, Elder," she said softly. "I have tamed the great beast and broken its curse over these waters. We can drink from the river again." Without another word, she walked through the stunned crowd of villagers and returned to her hut, all the snakes faithfully following behind her. In the days that followed, no one dared speak of what they had witnessed. Aiza did not explain herself, and no one asked. Life went on as normal. But over the next few months, Aziza's stomach began to swell and distend. At first, it was easy to hide under her flowing robes, but eventually, it became clear to everyone that the young, unmarried Aiza was with child. "She has been cursed by the mermaid," the villagers gasped in hushed tones. Some feared the child would be a monster and wanted Aiza exiled from the village for her own safety during her birthing. But Elder Karim refused. "She is still the same child who has guarded and protected us all these years," he proclaimed. "If she has been impregnated by some dark magic of the Forbidden River, we must have faith in her." And so the villagers begrudgingly allowed Aiza to remain and give birth in her hut. They said prayers to the gods and ancestors, fearing what unholy spawn might soon enter the world. Finally, the day of Aziza's birthing arrived. The entire village waited with bated breath outside her hut, weapons at the ready should any foul creature emerge. Aziza's cries of pain echoed through the night as her mother and the village midwives assisted her. After hours of laboring, a final piercing scream rang out, and then the cry of a newborn baby. The villagers held their breath, gripping their spears tightly. But when Aziza's mother emerged from the hut, cradling a bundle of blankets, she had a peaceful smile on her face. "It is a boy," she announced. "A perfectly normal, healthy human boy." Gasps of relief and shock rippled through the crowd. Elder Karim went inside to see for himself. When he returned, he motioned for the villagers to lower their weapons. "The child is indeed human," he declared. "There is no dark magic or curse at work here." Over the next few weeks, despite the circumstances of his conception, the villagers came to accept Aziza's son. They saw he was just as any other newborn, with 10 fingers and 10 toes. Though he had his mother's enchanting dark eyes and bright smile. Aiza named him Kamari, which meant born of the river in the old village tongue. She raised him on her own, with a little help from the village. But she refused to speak of how he had been conceived or who his father was. The years passed, and Kamari grew into a strong, healthy young boy. He seemed completely normal, except he never wanted to play in the river or even go near it, almost as if he feared it. On his 10th birthday, as the village was celebrating with song and dance late into the night, Kamari awoke from his sleep in a cold sweat. A force was calling him, tugging him towards the forbidden river. He knew he should resist, but it was overpowering. Slowly, with a blank, trance-like stare, Kamari made his way out of the village and through the bushes towards the Yoku river. The snakes that had once been his mother's guardians slithered out and quickly encircled the boy, as if trying to protect or perhaps restrain him. But Kamari simply pushed forward in his daze. When he reached the riverbank, the waters began glowing that unnatural, bloody crimson red. The snakes stopped and held back, hissing. Kamari paid them no mind. Stripping off his clothes, he waded out into the strange, glowing waters. He felt himself being pulled down, deeper underwater until everything went black. The village woke the next morning to shrieks of terror. Kamari's lifeless body had washed up on the riverbank, his eyes still open and face frozen in fear. Kamari, the lone son of Aiza and her mermaid lover, was dead. The ground shook as Aiza let out a cry of agony that could have raised the dead. She fell to her knees in the mud, cradling her son's body and weeping. Elder Karim and the men stood in solemn silence. None could understand what dark forces claimed the boy. This was a tragedy no ritual or magic could heal. Just then, the river waters began churning violently, as if something huge thrashed beneath the surface. Suddenly, the monstrous form of the mermaid exploded from the depths. The villagers scattered in terror, grabbing weapons as the mermaid pulled itself onto the riverbank with its massive finned tail and arms. It opened its jaws in a ferocious roar until it saw Aiza. The mermaid instantly froze in place, eyes locked on the weeping mother holding her dead son. As tears streamed down Aziza's face, something strange happened. The mermaid began weeping as well. Great, heaving sobs shook its massive body. Slowly, almost reverently, the mermaid crawled on its fins and stomach toward Aiza and Kamari's body. It nuzzled its head against the boy's cheek, letting out a mournful wail. The villagers could only watch in stunned, fearful silence as the legendary monster that had cursed their waters displayed human emotions over the loss of the boy. After untold ages of snakes, spirits, and the very river itself owing allegiance to Aiza, it finally became clear she was the reincarnation of an ancient river goddess. And Kamari had been a demigod, the royalty of the river realm, born of her union with the mermaid deity. That was the only way to explain these unfathomable events. The mermaid looked up at Aiza with tears in its inhuman eyes. She gave it a small, solemn nod of acknowledgement. It then bowed its head to her and slid back into the river depths, disappearing for what was hopefully an eternity. From that day on, the forbidden river regained its natural flow, and the villagers paid it no more mind than the other waters that gave them life. And young mothers would whisper to their babes the story of the river goddess who fell in love with a creature of the deep. Aiza was heartbroken after losing her son Kamari to the cursed river. For days, she barely ate or slept, just crying over his small body. The villagers didn't know what to do. Finally, Elder Karim went to Aziza's hut. "Child, we must put Kamari's spirit to rest properly," he said gently. "It's time to prepare his burial." Aiza slowly nodded. She bathed Kamari's body with sacred river water and dressed him in his finest clothes. The whole village then gathered to bid him farewell. As Kamari's body was laid in the grave, Aiza stepped forward. In a voice thick with grief, she began chanting in that same strange ancient language as before. The villagers shivered. Her words seemed to hold great power. When the chanting ended, Aiza threw handfuls of red and black powders over Kamari's grave. Instantly, the dirt began shifting and mounding upwards like it was alive. The villagers gasped as the freshly dug grave rose up into a large mound, shaping itself into a miniature mountain. Aiza then sank to her knees and bowed her head low. When she stood, tears were streaming down her cheeks again, but her expression was one of peace and acceptance. "My son's spirit now rests in the hallowed grounds, safe from any curse or evil," she said resolutely. "He has returned to the river's eternal embrace." The days and weeks passed, and life went on in the village, albeit tinged with sadness over Kamari. But Aiza had changed. Her smiles were warm but short-lived. Her eyes always looked haunted, viewing the world through a mother's profound grief. One night, Aiza woke with a start. Something felt wrong. She looked around her small hut, but everything seemed normal. Yet she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Suddenly, a cold chill ran down her spine as she heard a faint whisper. "Mother?" Aziza's heart pounded. That voice. No, it couldn't be. She held her breath, straining her ears. There it was again, a soft, familiar whisper. "Mother, help me." It was Kamari's voice. Aiza leapt from her bed, tears streaming down her face. "Kamari! Kamari, my son, where are you?" She spun around, searching desperately. The whisper seemed to come from outside. Aiza flung open the door and raced into the night, following the sound of her son's haunting voice. It led her through the village and into the dense jungle surrounding it. Branches whipped at her face as she pushed deeper into the darkness. "Kamari, I'm coming, my son." Finally, she emerged in a small clearing, and there, hovering above Kamari's grave mound, was a faint, ghostly figure. Aiza gasped. It was Kamari, his translucent form flickering like a candle's flame. "Mother, you must help me," his voice echoed all around her. "I'm trapped, bound to the river's curse." Aiza fell to her knees, sobbing. "No, Kamari. I laid your spirit to rest. You were supposed to be at peace." Kamari's ghost drifted closer, his eyes sad. "The cursed river is powerful, Mother. My body is buried, but my soul remains ensnared. You must break the curse, or I'll be trapped forever, suffering unimaginable torture." Aziza's hands trembled. "What must I do? I'll do anything to free you, my son." "You must journey upriver," Kamari whispered, "to the cursed river's source. There, you'll find a way to break its hold on me. But beware, Mother. The jungle is filled with dangers. Evil spirits and cursed beings will try to stop you at every turn." Aiza swallowed hard but nodded resolutely. "I don't care what stands in my way. I will save you, Kamari. This I vow." As the first rays of dawn began filtering through the trees, Kamari's ghost slowly faded, but his final whisper echoed through the clearing. "Be brave, Mother, and trust no one." Aiza quickly got ready for her dangerous journey up the river. She packed some basic things: dried food, water containers, a rope, and her sharp machete for cutting through the thick jungle. The people in her village tried to stop her, saying the mission was too dangerous for one woman alone. But Aiza had made up her mind. She had to save her son's troubled soul, no matter what. Before leaving, Aiza visited her son Kamari's grave one last time. Kneeling down, she pressed her hand to the soft earth. "I will come back, my son. Wait for me," she whispered firmly. Then Aiza began following the cursed river inland. The jungle closed in around her right away, blocking out the sun's light. Twisted vines and gnarled branches caught on her clothes and skin. Aiza cursed under her breath as she cut her way through, the humid air making her weak. She had only been walking for a few hours when she heard it, an eerie crying sound, drifting through the dense leaves and branches. Aiza froze, listening hard. There it was again, a sad cry like a baby in distress. Her heart ached. It sounded just like Kamari's cries when he was an infant. Feeling an urgent need, Aiza changed direction, pushing towards the source of the haunting cries. She stumbled into a small clearing and gasped at what she saw. A young woman from the village stood there, cradling a tightly wrapped bundle in her arms. She rocked back and forth, softly crying as she nuzzled the bundled form. Aiza felt a lump in her throat. She recognized this woman. It was Amina, one of the newest mothers in the village. Her baby son had been born just days before Kamari's tragic death. "Amina," Aiza called gently, not wanting to startle her friend. "What are you doing out here?" Amina looked up, her eyes wide and staring. Her face was deathly pale. "My son," she whispered. "My beautiful son." A cold knot formed in Aziza's stomach. Trembling, she stepped closer and peered at the bundle in Amina's arms. What she saw will be forever stuck in her mind. It wasn't a baby at all, just a grotesque bundle of sticks, vines, and mud, roughly shaped like an infant. Amina seemed utterly convinced it was her child, cuddling and cooing at the woven monstrosity. "Amina, that's not your son," Aiza cried in horror. "We have to get you back to the village." But the deluded woman just backed away, clutching the bundle protectively. "No, you can't take him from me." Her eyes bored into Aziza's, wide and not understanding. Then Amina turned and fled deeper into the jungle, her wails fading into the shadows. Aiza stood there, shaken to her core. What sort of dark power could cause such a terrifying delusion? She had no choice but to continue on her way, praying she wouldn't encounter any other victims of the jungle's evil trickery. The jungle seemed to grow darker and more overgrown the further upriver she traveled. Soon, Aiza was cutting her way through an oppressive tangle of vines, branches, and hanging roots, creating a claustrophobic maze. The dank air stank of rotting plants, and she could have sworn she heard scurrying creatures all around her. She tried to move quickly, her skin crawling. Suddenly, a gnarled root seemed to reach out and grab her ankle. Aiza yelped as she was pulled off her feet, crashing to the ground. Panicked, she swung her machete, cutting the offending root. A foul-smelling green ooze gushed out, sizzling as it hit the jungle floor. Aiza scrambled to her feet and backed away, panting hard. There was no doubt in her mind now. The jungle itself was alive, and it wasn't going to let her pass easily. Gripping her machete tightly, Aiza pressed on, cutting and slashing her way through the ever-thickening vines and roots. More than once, she had to stop to furiously cut away at the grasping tendrils holding her fast. Her arms and legs were soon covered in cuts, oozing the same vile green pus as the cut roots. But she refused to give up. Aiza finally staggered into a small, clear space, gasping for the stale air. Her whole body screamed with pain and exhaustion. She collapsed to the ground, her vision blurring. That's when she heard it. A soft tapping sound. Straining her head up, Aziza's blood froze in her veins. There, just a few feet away, stood a twisted half-human figure. Its lower body seemed almost melted into the very ground, gnarled vines and roots woven into its grotesque form. But its torso and head were unmistakably that of a man. The creature looked at her with dull, lidless eyes as it slowly raised a gnarled arm, ending in 3 sharp wooden spines dripping with the same green ooze. Tap, tap, tap. Too drained to even scream, Aiza simply watched in mute horror as the creature pulled its arm back, staring at her unblinkingly. Despite her bravery, despite her desperation to rescue Kumari's soul, she knew in that moment she was going to die. The creature tensed, ready to strike. But just then, a piercing screech shattered the heavy silence. Something shot from the shadows, a black blur of fur and fangs. The jungle creature barely had time to turn before it was knocked to the ground, its throat torn open in a spray of foul green fluid. Aiza could only stare as a massive black panther stood over the thrashing monster, growling deep in its chest. With 2 more swipes of its claws, the creature's head was fully severed, steaming fluid pouring onto the soft earth. Amazingly, the vines and roots began writhing almost immediately, slowly absorbing the decapitated monstrosity's form back into the jungle floor until only a wet stain remained. But the panther wasn't done yet. Padding over to Aiza, the huge cat fixed her with fierce golden eyes. It opened its powerful jaws, giving her a full view of its gleaming fangs, and then spoke in a bone-chilling, rasping voice. "You are being hunted by an ancient evil, born of this cursed jungle. I sense great loss and determination in you, daughter of the village. Speak your journey's purpose quickly, before the beasts return." Too stunned to be properly afraid, Aiza found her voice. I'm traveling upriver, to the source of the curse, to break it and free my son's spirit." The panther's eyes seemed to bore into her very soul. After a tense pause, it gave a curt nod. "Then you must have this." With that, the panther turned its head and sank its jaws into its own thick black fur. With a sickening tearing sound, it ripped out a clump of its coat. Aiza stared in horror at the weeping wound, red blood quickly matting the animal's sleek fur. But the panther acted like it felt no pain. Instead, it extended the clump of fur towards her with an expectant look. Despite her revulsion, Aiza knew better than to refuse the jungle spirit's offering. With trembling hands, she took the blood-soaked fur clump from the predator's jaws. "That fur is filled with my spirit's energy. Carry it with you, and it may keep you safe from the cursed jungle's vile deceptions. I will guide you as far as I can. Now come, we must keep moving before more beasts are drawn by the smell of blood." Without waiting for a response, the massive panther turned and began loping deeper into the jungle. Not daring to disobey, Aiza clutched the wet fur to her chest and scurried after the spirit guide. They kept walking through the thick forest. Sometimes, gross monster things came out to attack them. but the big black panther just growled loudly, and the monster things went away scared. Aiza held tight to the bloody fur clump. She was so tired and hurting from all the cuts, but she didn't stop. After walking for a very long time, they came to a stinking swamp. Bubbles were popping up from the dirty water and it smelled really bad, like rotten eggs. The panther stopped at the edge. "This is as far as I can help you," it said in a rough voice. "The curse's dark power is getting stronger ahead. You must use the spirit fur to protect you now." Aiza's heart was beating fast. She was so scared, but she nodded bravely. "Thank you for your help, jungle spirit." The panther dipped its head. Then it turned and ran away, disappearing back into the deep forest. Aiza looked at the foul swamp waters. She could see human skulls and bones sticking out here and there. Her stomach felt sick, but she took a deep breath. "I have to keep going. For Kamari." Holding her machete and the spirit fur tight, Aiza stepped into the dirty swamp. The foul water splashed around her legs as she waded forward. She tried not to look at the skulls. Suddenly, there was a loud noise and a smelly green gas burst out of the swamp all around her. Aiza gasped and coughed, covering her nose and mouth with the fur clump. The gas stung her eyes and made her dizzy. Through the haze, she saw shapes coming out of the swamp. At first, they looked like waterlogged dead bodies, until they got closer. Their bodies were disgustingly bloated, with skinny limbs and sunken, skull-like faces. Their eyes were empty black holes, and they opened their mouths in terrible screeching wails. Aiza wanted to run, but she stood her ground, holding the spirit fur up protectively. "Stay back, cursed ones," she shouted in a shaky voice. The corpse things ignored her, continuing their eerie advance. Aiza shut her eyes tight, holding the fur up like a shield as the first one lunged. But no attack came. After a few moments, she opened her eyes again. The corpse things were gone. Somehow the spirit fur had protected her, making the evil swamp visions disappear. Feeling enormously relieved, but also more tired than ever, Aiza kept going forward. Hours seemed to pass as she walked through the never-ending swamp. She shuddered each time her feet touched another skull or bone. The foul smells clung to the air, making her feel feverish. Just when she felt she couldn't go on any longer, the water became shallower. A short distance ahead, Aiza could see a raised piece of firmer ground. A twisted dead tree stuck up from its center, skeletal branches reaching at the dirty sky. Forcing her shaky legs to keep moving, Aiza finally pulled herself up onto the little island of land. She collapsed on her back, sides heaving, staring tiredly up at the bare branches above. That's when a new horror appeared over her. Dozens of shriveled humanoid forms hung from the dead tree's branches. Their tiny leathery bodies twisted gently in the swamp's smells, hollow eye sockets gaping down at her. Aiza opened her mouth to scream, but an eerie sound stopped her. It was a raspy whispering. The shrunken corpses were whispering, their bone-thin lips barely moving. She strained to understand the words. "Give it to us." Again and again, the papery voices chanted the same eerie phrase, building to a dry roar. "Give it to us! Give it to us!" Aiza huddled on the ground, shaking violently, realizing the horrid things wanted the spirit fur. She held it close as the whispering grew deafening, pulling it over her face to block out the sight of the dangling corpses. Just then, a loud snap made her jump upright. One of the shriveled forms had dropped from the branch and hit the ground inches from her face. Its skull twisted towards her, jaw creaking open in a lipless shriek. "Give it to us, sis!" Before Aiza could even think, she was stumbling to her feet and running. Not caring about the scratching branches and dangling bodies, she ran ahead blindly, churning through the shallow swamp waters and thick smells. The shrieks followed her, growing more fevered. "Give it! Give it! Give it!" She ran until her legs gave out, pitching her forward into blissfully deep water. Aiza let herself sink beneath the dirt, the cries finally muffled. She floated there, every muscle screaming, just trying to breathe. When she finally surfaced, breaking through a patch of floating scum and vines, she looked around in bewilderment. The swamp seemed to have ended, leading to a large open area. A series of rocky ledges climbed higher, the treetops far below. As she dragged herself out of the water and onto a mossy bank, Aiza realized she had reached the headwaters of the cursed river at last. The cliff faces ahead looked tall and forbidding, as if the very heart of the jungle was hidden beyond. She was so close now, but could barely gather the strength to keep going. Aiza collapsed on the bank, her grip on the damp spirit fur, the only thing keeping her conscious. No matter what other terrors lay ahead, she knew she had to keep pressing on to this evil's source. Her son's tormented soul was waiting, somewhere beyond those cliffs. Aiza shut her eyes, mustering what little courage she had left. Aiza rested for a bit to catch her breath after the swamp's nightmare. Her clothes were torn and covered in mud and yucky swamp water. The spirit fur was messy too, but she held on tight to it. It had already protected her from so many creepy jungle monsters. Looking up at the tall rocky cliffs, Aiza felt a little scared knot in her stomach. But she remembered why she was here, to find the source of the cursed river and break the evil spell trapping her son Kamari's spirit. Taking a deep breath, she got up and started climbing. It was a really hard climb, especially after everything she'd been through in the jungle already. Loose rocks tumbled down as she pulled herself higher, cutting her hands. The hot sun beating down made her dizzy. She had to stop a few times to drink some water and rest. After what felt like forever, Aiza finally pulled herself over the top ridge. She gasped at the sight in front of her, a massive lake, perfectly still and round, stretching as far as she could see. The cliffs formed a giant bowl all around the black, glassy waters. This had to be the cursed river's source. Suddenly, Aiza felt the hairs on her neck stand up. A strange energy tingled through the air. She looked around carefully. The cliff walls were covered in cave openings and shadowy cracks. She couldn't shake the feeling that something, or some things, were watching her from the darkness. Taking a few careful steps forward, Aiza looked down at the glassy lake. Its inky surface was so still she couldn't even see a hint of movement beneath. Yet she sensed something sinister and powerful resting in those black depths. Then, without warning, the lake waters violently exploded upwards in a tremendous geyser. Aiza stumbled back, shielding her face as the black liquid rained down. When she looked again, the eruption had formed a human-like shape, rising from the center of the lake, rapidly growing taller. Within moments, a gigantic figure towered over Aiza, formed entirely of the cursed lake's inky waters. It loomed dozens of feet high, a featureless black torso splitting into multiple tentacle-like limbs undulating across the surface. The only feature was a pair of piercing red eyes that seemed to glow from within its fluid head. In a deafening voice that shook the cliffs, the lake creature bellowed, "Usus! Foolish human! You dare bring your curses to my home?" Aiza tried not to be afraid, holding up the spirit fur in front of her. "Dread beast, I am Aiza, and I have come to break the curses over this jungle and river." to free my son's trapped spirit." The gigantic sloshing form seemed to consider her for a moment. Then it reared back, its crimson eyes flaring brighter. "Your son was an abomination, conceived from an unholy union. He disrupted the balance and woke my dark slumbers. I will not release him. He must suffer for eternity, trapped between the worlds." A terrifying scream pierced Aziza's mind. It was Kamari's voice, filled with unimaginable pain and desperately pleading for help. His cries echoed from everywhere, overwhelming her senses with his spiritual torment. Tears streamed down Aziza's face as she fell to her knees, clutching at her head. "Please, please, I beg you," she sobbed brokenly. "He is my son. You must let him go." All around, the shadowed caves seemed to come alive with shapes slinking out. Scores of wretched human-like forms, all composed of dense ropes of inky black liquid like the towering beast, emerged and quickly circled Aziza. They shambled and writhed, eyeless faces twisted into leering sneers. The gargantuan beast's echoing voice shook the cliffs again. "You seek to defy the ancient curse that binds this land? Then you will join your son in eternal spiritual torment." It raised two massive tentacle arms as the ringing in Aziza's head intensified. The circling liquid creatures joined their master, slowly merging into a churning black wave that began crashing over her. Aiza wanted to scream, to cry out for mercy, but found herself suddenly mute, paralyzed with fear. The dark tsunami swallowed her whole. Her lungs burned as the murky waters filled her mouth and nose. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, lost in total inky blackness. Then, like a flickering light through the shadows, Kamari's voice reached her again. This time soft, soothing, encouraging his mother not to give up. "The spirit fur, Mother! Don't let go!" With the last of her fading strength, Aiza clutched the sodden fur clump to her chest. An intense warmth instantly spread from her fingers, pulsing with energy and light from within the tangle of bloody strands. The cursed waters seemed to hiss and recoil from the spirit magic. Holding tight to the blazing fur, Aiza let its power envelop her. The oppressive black ocean fell away, replaced by an incandescent glow that bathed her in purifying light and warmth. All the fear, pain, and hopelessness melted from her body like waking from a nightmare. When the light finally faded, Aiza found herself standing strong and unbowed once more, facing the towering lake beast. It had shrunk, reverting to a tiny liquid form just barely human-like, clearly weakened and afraid of the spirit fur's magic. "Impudent river demon," Aziza's voice rang out, emboldened and almost otherworldly in its power. "You have corrupted this land and tormented innocent souls for far too long. Your reign of darkness ends now." The small liquid being tried to flee, slithering back towards the lake's still surface. But Aiza simply raised the glowing fur, focusing its blinding white energy into a searing beam of holy light that struck the creature head-on. Its form convulsed as if being purified from the inside out, shrieking in black smoky bursts. At last, silence fell over the cursed lake as the dark spirit dissipated like a waking dream. The waters stilled, their inky blackness fading to a brilliant blue. Shimmering mirrors of light reflected off the surface, banishing all traces of the ancient evil. Aiza bowed her head, clutching the spirit fur close, as she softly repeated the words that had been shown to her. "Flow freely once more, sacred river. Your tainted chains are broken." In that moment, a familiar ghostly figure flickered into view beside the lake. It was Kamari, his translucent form beaming radiantly, finally released from eternal damnation. "You did it, Mother," he exclaimed joyfully. "You broke the wretched curse. I can move on now to the blessed realm where I belong." Aiza rushed forward, trying and failing to embrace her son's spectral body. Tears of relief fell unheeded as she smiled at him with a mother's boundless love. "My precious boy, I don't want you to go. Stay with me." Kamari smiled back sadly but shook his head. "You know I cannot linger in this world any longer. My spirit is finally free to depart, and your part in this realm is not yet done." He motioned towards the sunlight sparkling off the reborn lake's surface. "This sacred place has been restored to its former glory, all thanks to your courage and love. A new goddess must take her rightful place as its eternal guardian." Realization slowly dawned in Aziza's eyes. Of course. From the moment they first encountered the river's darkness, some deep part of her had subconsciously awoken to her true divine nature. It was her spiritual essence that had taken form as the spirit fur's power, an innate goddess force, destined to purify the lands. Kamari's voice pulled her back to the present. "You have suffered enough for your divinity, Mother. Say goodbye to me, and accept your immortal role as protector of these waters." Aiza knew he was right, that their bond could never be as it once was. She pulled her son close one last time, drinking in his warmth before it inevitably slipped away. "I love you, Kamari, now and forever. And I you, Mother." Then, like smoke in the wind, Kamari's spirit slowly disappeared into sparkling pieces of light. Aiza watched with tears in her eyes as her son's essence went up towards the sky, finally at peace. Though her heart hurt from his passing, Aiza felt a strong sense of purpose grow inside her. She turned to face the reborn lake, its clean waters shining with new life. Drawing the spirit fur close, she let its divine energies flow through her. In that changing moment, Aziza's human form seemed to dissolve and reshape into something beyond. Her torn clothes and tired looks fell away, replaced by glowing blue skin that sparkled like the lake itself. Her body stretched and flowed into a snake-like shape, powerful coils moving across the cliff's surface. When the change was complete, Aiza had become an amazing water goddess, a huge 60-foot azure serpent with fancy fins and armored scales. She opened her eyes, now bright blue orbs, and saw her reborn home with ancient wisdom. A deep, melodic voice came from her fanged mouth, echoing across the cliffs. "The river's blessing is restored. I will guard forever against corruption and darkness. Let this sacred place always remain where life is reborn." With an almighty surge, the gigantic water serpent arched her scaled neck and plunged into the lake's depths. The waters accepted their new goddess protector, parting to swallow Aziza's snake form in a shimmering vortex. When the surface calmed again, only the curved rear fin remained, circling forever in the lake's center like an iconic sculpture. The cliffs seemed to hum with renewed primal energies, their rock faces already becoming lush with green growth. And high above, faintly visible beyond the veil of the human world, a blazing new constellation had been written across the heavens. It twinkled in the unmistakable shape of a serpent ready to strike, the eternal stellar form of the river goddess, Aiza, ever watchful. Aiza woke up feeling very confused and dizzy. She looked around and did not know where she was at first. It was a small, plain room with white walls. She was lying on a hard bed. "Where am I?" she said out loud in a tired voice. "You're in the hospital, dear," said a kind female voice. A nurse in blue clothes came over to Aziza's bed. You're going to be okay. You got hurt pretty bad out there in those woods." Memories started coming back to Aiza. The bad jungle, the monster swamps, fighting the evil river monster to save her son's spirit. She gasped and tried to sit up quickly. "Take it easy," the nurse said, gently pushing her back down. "You've been sleeping for 2 days. We found you naked and confused, covered in cuts and scratches out by the old river bend." Aiza shook her head, feeling worried. No, you don't understand. I have to get back to the special lake." The nurse gave her a worried look. "Dear, you were very dehydrated, malnourished, and it seemed like you had a bad head injury. We're just glad you're alive right now. There haven't been any special lakes around here for a very long time." Aiza opened her mouth to protest, but the nurse continued in a calming tone. "Why don't you just rest for now? Your family is here and they've been really worried about you." At those words, Aziza's heart jumped. She hadn't seen her parents and siblings in... well, she couldn't even remember how long. A few moments later, the door opened and her mother rushed in, followed by her father and little brother. Tears streamed down her mother's face as she pulled Aiza into a tight hug. "My baby, we thought we'd lost you forever." Aiza hugged her back tightly, feeling lots of emotions. Her father and brother joined in the hug, all of them laughing and crying at the same time. For a few minutes, nothing else mattered except being reunited with her loved ones. When they finally pulled away, Aziza's dad looked at her with red eyes. "Where in the world have you been, Aiza? You've been missing for over 2 months." 2 months? Aziza's mind reeled at that news. She tried to gather her thoughts, to explain what had happened. "Papa, I know this is going to sound unbelievable, but I was in the old bad jungle upriver. It started when I had a vision of Kamari." "Kamari? Who is Kamari?" her mother asked in wonder. Aiza told her family everything that happened. She told them about the bad dreams she had about her dead son's spirit being trapped. She told them about following his voice into the jungle. She told them the big journey where she fought bad spirits and monsters to break an old river curse. She said she became one with the river's goddess spirit and is now the protector of the river forever. When she finished talking, her family just stared at her for a long time. They looked very surprised. Aziza's face turned red because she wondered if she said too much about her spiritual awakening. Finally, Aziza's father shook his head slowly. "My dear daughter, something terrible must have happened to you alone in the wilderness. We are just happy you are alive with us now, even if you are not fully well." Aiza frowned. "But Papa, I am telling the truth. "We understand, sweetheart," her mother said, gently shushing her and stroking her cheek. "Your mind had to make sense of things in its own way when you were so sick and delirious in the jungle. We will help you get better, and you can forget about those jungle demons and river spirit stories." Aiza looked at her brother, hoping he would believe her, but he just stared at the floor and did not look at her. Aiza was frustrated, so she threw off her covers and got out of the bed with surprising strength. This startled her family. Even though everything hurt, she stood up straight, feeling very determined. "You have to listen to me, all of you," she said firmly. "Everything I said is true about Kamari, the jungle evils, the goddess awakening in me. I don't expect you to fully understand right now, but you'll see." Then Aiza turned and walked out of the hospital room, down the hallways with rooms for people recovering. Her worried family hurried to follow her as she went outside into the bright sun. Cars were zooming by on the street in front of the tall hospital. The loud city noises surrounded them. Car horns, helicopters overhead, shouts from construction sites far away. Aiza did not pay attention to any of it. Instead, she walked toward the trees of the nature area next to the hospital property. She walked with purpose. "Aiza, please stop," her mother cried, grabbing her arm. "Where are you going? You need to rest inside." Her father put his hand on her shoulder. "Aiza, you cannot be serious. You were almost dead when they found you. Going back into those woods would be crazy." "I have to go," Aiza said calmly. "It is my destiny to protect the sacred lands and waters as their immortal guardian." Aziza's little brother Raj spoke in a quiet voice. "Jesus Christ. Aiza, the things you're saying do not make any sense. Monsters and bad spirits? River spirits? You are scaring us." Aiza looked at Raj with sad eyes. "I know it sounds crazy, but everything I saw was real. During my journey, I found an old power, one that has been in our family's blood for hundreds of years." She put her hands on her chest, feeling a strange energy moving through her body. "The river goddess woke up inside me. She showed me wonderful things and scary things. I joined with her life force, becoming her new person on Earth. My baby, what bad thing happened to you out there?" Her mother cried. Shaking her head firmly, Aiza said, "I am not hurt or seeing things that aren't real, Mother. My mind has never been more clear. I have been reborn with an important purpose that goes beyond this normal world, and I must go back to the jungle to do my special duties before something bad happens." With that, Aiza turned and walked towards the trees again with strong steps. Her family watched in shocked silence for a moment before her father shouted, "Security! Stop that woman! She's not well!" 2 big hospital security guards came over, moving to block Aiza before she reached the woods. "Mum, you need to stop right there," one of them said roughly. "Let's get you back inside where it's safe." Aiza tried to get away from the men, but was eventually stopped, and she stood at a place with folded arms and an angry look. Her family rushed to her again, and the mother began crying, looking directly into her eyes. "Aiza, my precious child, this is madness. It was all a dream. You have never been pregnant. Why always talking about Kamari? And you have never left this city to any village. Jesus Christ. Aiza, what you had or feel you are was all a dream, because of your fall in the forest. Come back to us, my child." Tears streamed down Aziza's cheeks as she put her head down in disappointment. "But it all seems real, and it never felt like I was dreaming any of it." Aiza looked up at her family with tears in her eyes. "I know how unbelievable this all sounds, but I swear to you everything I saw was real. The jungle, the bad spirits, joining with the river goddess. It felt more vivid than any dream." Her father put his arm around her shoulders. "Honey, we want to believe you, but what you're describing, it simply can't be true. You must have had some kind of very hot dream or seen things that weren't real out there in the woods." Raj stepped forward slowly. "Sis, you've always had such an incredible imagination. Maybe this is just an extreme fantasy your mind made up when you got lost and dehydrated." Aiza felt utterly sad and confused as her family begged her to accept that her spiritual awakening had just been an intense dream, or seeing things that weren't real. She couldn't understand how they couldn't believe her after everything she had witnessed and experienced. The security guards made Aiza go back inside the hospital, even though she did not want to. Her parents decided it would be best if she stayed at the hospital, so doctors could check her mind and watch her. Aiza protested a lot. but she was too weak to fight much after her scary time. Over the next few days, the doctors did various tests on Aiza, and she talked to counselors while taking medication to keep her calm. She tried explaining her story again, but the doctors just nodded and wrote notes about her seeming disconnected from reality. Finally, after a week at the hospital with no other issues, Aiza's parents took her home. Her mother fussed over her constantly, happy to have her daughter back safe, even if she seemed a bit off. Aiza's father was more doubtful, worried that she may have permanent damage to her mind from being alone in those woods. Aiza spent her days feeling numb and lifeless. She no longer felt the power of the river goddess inside her. The vivid memories of the cursed jungle and the fantastical beings she met were starting to fade and feel like a far-off dream. Had she just imagined it all while dehydrated and feverish? One night after everyone else went to bed, Aiza went into the backyard under the full moon. She stared up at the glowing moon in the dark sky and whispered a prayer to the river spirit, begging for a sign that she hadn't gone crazy, that her awakening was real. Just then, Aiza's little brother Raj screamed from inside in terror that made her blood run cold. Aiza raced inside to find Raj cowering in the hallway, pointing a shaking finger towards the living room. Monster! There was a monster in there, he cried hysterically. The rest of the family came running and turned on the living room light. There in the middle of the floor was a large pile of damp soil and plants, the kind found in a thick jungle, and pushed into the dirt were massive footprints, the prints of some huge, unhuman creature. Aiza's mother screamed, and her father immediately called the police. As the shaken family huddled together, Aiza stared at the mysterious footprints with dawning realization. The cursed jungle had found her again. Her spiritual awakening had been real after all, and the ancient evil forces she failed to defeat were coming for her. The police came to Aiza's house right away after her father's frantic call. They looked very confused when they saw the massive muddy footprints and jungle plants all over the living room. "What in the world?" one officer muttered while taking pictures. "This has to be some kind of prank," the other officer said skeptically. "Tracking all this mud and vegetation inside doesn't seem funny, though." Aiza's father shook his head adamantly. "I swear, officers, we have no idea how this got here. We were just sitting down to watch TV and then my son saw... well, he thought he saw a monster creature." Raj was still trembling as he explained what happened. "I just went to the living room to grab a soda from the kitchen. When I turned on the light, there was this giant, hairy monster standing in the middle of the room. It was taller than Dad, with long arms and bony fingers. It turned and looked right at me with these crazy red eyes and mouth full of fangs. Then it let out this horrific roar and I ran out screaming." The police officers exchanged doubtful looks as Raj's mother comforted him. "Son, I know you got a fright," the first officer said gently. "But seeing actual monsters, maybe you just imagined it, or it was a trick of shadows and lights or something." "No, I know what I saw," Raj yelled insistently. His whole body shook. "It was a real-life monster like the ones from a scary horror movie. You have to believe me." Aiza watched the whole scene calmly, deep in thought. She recognized the mud and plants. They were exactly like the vegetation from the cursed jungle she had traveled, which must mean Raj had indeed encountered one of the evil jungle's awful beasts. Somehow, the ancient forces she thought she had defeated were not done with her yet. They were able to reach out and send one of their monsters right into her home, perhaps as a warning, or the start of something bigger. Aiza cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. "It's all connected to me," she said firmly. "Ever since my awakening in the cursed jungle, I'm bound to its magic and the dark powers there. They must be after me again for some reason." Her parents shot her frustrated looks, but Raj studied her with surprising intensity. The police officers frowned at Aiza. "Miss, I don't know what you're talking about with jungles and magic," the first officer said seriously. "But if you had anything to do with this incident, whatever prank or stunt this is, it needs to stop right now." Aiza shook her head adamantly. "This is no prank, officer. I finally experienced what I was born to become, a human embodiment of a powerful river spirit. That jungle and its inhabitants were all too real." Gesturing at the muddy footprints, she continued, "Those markings could only have been left by one of the jungle's native beasts, like the creature my brother described. Evil, shape-shifting monsters that serve the cursed land's dark forces. They must be summoning me back for some reason after my awakening." Both officers' jaws dropped, and even Aziza's family was stunned into silence by her crazy insistence. Finally, the second officer stepped forward. "Okay, Ma'am, that's enough nonsense out of you. We're doing our job here, investigating an incident, not listening to wild monster stories." He took out his handcuffs with a serious look. "If you don't pipe down, I'll have to take you in on suspicion of this being a deranged stunt." Aiza looked at her parents pleadingly. "You have to believe me. That jungle was real. The evil spirits were trying to corrupt my soul and stop me from realizing my true destiny. When I awakened as the river's human guardian, I thought I stopped the ancient curse over the land, but now it seems the dark forces are still hunting me." The police didn't believe Aziza's crazy story about monsters and magic jungles, but her family knew there was some truth in what she said, after the strange plants and footprints appeared. They convinced the officers that Aiza sometimes got confused, but meant no harm. Once the police left, Aziza's parents demanded to know what was really going on. Raj backed up his sister, saying he truly saw a terrifying monster creature appear briefly before it vanished. Aiza explained again about her journey into the cursed jungle to break an ancient evil spell. She described the evil beasts and dark magic she battled to finally join with the river goddess spirit and become its immortal human guardian. "I thought I defeated the curse's foul forces," Aiza said gravely. "But it seems they are still able to reach out from the jungle and attack me in this world now." She immediately had a flashback on how everything started. 3 months earlier, she recalled when she asked her parents if she could go hiking and have a picnic in the woods outside the city over the weekend. They agreed as long as she was careful. The day of her hike finally arrived. Aiza packed a backpack with snacks, water, and a blanket. She took a bus to the entry point of the woods and started hiking along the narrow dirt path winding through the dense trees. After an hour, Aiza came to a clearing with a vast river cutting through it. The river's murky water flowed rapidly over rocks and around bends. Aiza decided this would be the perfect spot for her picnic. She spread out her blanket on the riverbank and unpacked her food. As Aiza ate, she admired the river's mysterious power. She had always felt drawn to bodies of water. Suddenly, Aiza thought she saw something move in the river. A human-like form breached the surface for just a second before splashing back under. Aiza stared in confusion, wondering if her eyes played tricks on her. She continued eating, dismissing what she saw as her imagination. But then she heard an ethereal singing unlike anything she'd ever heard. La la la, la la la. The haunting melody seemed to come from the river itself, weaving in and out of the rushing currents. Aiza looked around but saw no one. The singing grew louder and more enchanting. She felt compelled to follow it into the river against her better judgment. Aiza waded in deeper and deeper until the water reached her waist. That's when something grabbed her leg and yanked her fully underwater. Aiza thrashed and kicked, opening her eyes to see the human-like form from before swimming in front of her. It was a mermaid with green, scaly skin and a powerful tail thrashing back and forth. The mermaid opened her mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. She screeched at Aiza in a language she couldn't comprehend. Then everything went black. When Aiza regained consciousness, she was lying on a sandy shore illuminated by a strange glowing moss. Her clothes and backpack were gone, leaving her in just her undergarments. Aiza looked around at the cave surrounding her. Rock formations hung from the high ceiling, dripping water into shallow pools. The only exit seemed to be the underground river she had been pulled into. The mermaid suddenly surfaced in one of the pools. "Welcome to my home, the ancient refuge of the river goddess Oguvi," she said in Nigerian English. What are you?" Aiza stammered, scooting back in fear. "I am the last of the river mermaid, charged with guarding Oguvi's sacred waters from surface dwellers like you," the mermaid replied. "I have not left these caves in over 20,000 years. I have been trapped here for so long." Aiza's mind raced, realizing the severity of her predicament. If the stories she had heard as a child were true, mermaids were not to be trifled with. "Please, I didn't mean any disrespect," Aiza pleaded. "I was just hiking and picnicking. I'll leave right away." The mermaid laughed, her sharp teeth baring menacingly. "You are not going anywhere, human. You are the chosen one who will release me and my kind from this underground prison." "What are you talking about? I don't know anything about you or this goddess," Aiza said, fighting back tears. The mermaid swam closer, her tail flicking back and forth like a snake ready to strike. "Long ago, my ancestors revered and protected the river goddess Oguvi. We were her guardians," the mermaid explained. "But the surface people turned against us and Oguvi, seeing us as monsters rather than mythical stewards of nature." Aiza listened intently, too terrified to respond. The mermaid continued. "Oguvi rescued us by encasing these underground caves in an invisible shield powered by her magic. She made us a deal. If we remained loyal and kept the river's waters pure, one day a human woman with Oguvi's bloodline would come and combine her life force with ours. This would remove the shield and return us to the surface to reign over the rivers once more." "And you think that human is me?" Aiza asked cautiously. The mermaid cackled, showing razor-sharp teeth. "I know it is you, foolish girl. I have been dreaming of you for centuries. You have Oguvi's cursed blood pulsing through your veins, passed down by your ancestors who betrayed her." The mermaid lunged at Aiza with impossible speed, wrapping a scaly hand around her neck and squeezing. Aiza gasped for air as she was dragged towards the glowing pool. "By combining my life force with yours, the curse will be lifted and I will become the true river goddess. We will enslave the surface world just as they once did to us." Aiza thrashed and kicked, managing to break free for a second. She scrambled away towards the cave's exit, not caring about the dangers of the raging underground river. But the mermaid was too fast. With a powerful lash of her tail, she knocked Aiza back down and pounced, straddling her and pinning her arms to the ground. The mermaid opened her mouth unnaturally wide, displaying 3 inward curved rows of teeth coated with a green liquid, venom to immobilize prey. She leaned down, her venom-dripping mouth inches from Aziza's face. Aiza squeezed her eyes shut and turned away, whimpering in terror as the end drew near. Suddenly the mermaid reeled back, screeching in agony. Aiza opened her eyes to see a large creature resembling a shrimp with massive pincers had attacked the mermaid, tearing into her arm with its claws. The mermaid released Aiza and frantically tried shaking off the shrimp beast. 2 more of the creatures darted out and went for the mermaid's tail. Seizing her chance, Aiza scrambled to her feet and sprinted towards the underground river, figuring being swallowed by the torrents was preferable to being eaten alive. She jumped in and allowed the raging currents to pull her away from the cave. Aiza held her breath as she was tossed violently through the tight winding tunnels. Just when she thought she would pass out from lack of air, Aiza was suddenly expelled from the river's mouth in a burst of white water. She gasped for air as she found herself in the open air once again. Aiza coughed and choked, pulling herself up on the riverbank. Miraculously, she had emerged from the underground just outside the city woods where her hike had started. She laid back on the grass, trying to process the wild events that had unfolded. Had it all been some sort of deranged nightmare? Or was there truth behind the vengeful river mermaid's claims about her being descended from a cursed river goddess? Aiza knew one thing. She would never stray from the city again or go near another body of water, no matter how drawn to it she felt. The woods and rivers harbored dangers she couldn't begin to comprehend. As she caught her breath, Aiza looked down at her arm and gasped in horror. There, beneath the mud and grime, her veins were glowing an ethereal blue, the same unearthly light as the cave's pools, and she passed out. Aziza's eyes opened slowly. At first, everything was blurry, but then she could see clearly that she was lying on an old rough mat made of straw on the floor of some kind of cave. The walls were made of damp dirt and had weird drawings and symbols all over them that Aiza didn't understand. In the middle of the cave was a small fire burning, which was the only light. "She's awake now," said a deep, rough voice coming from the shadows. Then a huge figure stepped out where Aiza could see it better. It was over 7 feet tall, with greyish leathery skin and a big ridge over its eyes that stuck out. Its body looked extremely muscular and strong, and it was covered in coarse hair all over. Aiza gasped in fright and tried to scramble backwards away from the monster, but it raised up one massive hand. "Don't be scared, child. You're safe here, at least for now," it rumbled. What are you?" Aiza stammered, her heart pounding hard in her chest. The creature looked like it had stepped out of her worst nightmares. "I am a Shitari," the beast answered in its deep rumbling voice. "A guardian sworn to protect the ancient river goddess Oguvi and her sacred waters and jungles all around." Aziza's mind raced as she tried to take this in. So the mermaid creature she had met really was telling the truth about there being ancient guardians protecting this river and goddess. "The mermaid," Aiza said hesitantly. "She told me I had Oguvi's bloodline, that I was supposed to join with her kind of creatures to break some kind of curse." The huge Shitari slowly nodded its great head. "The mermaid spoke the truth, though her intentions were wicked. You are the chosen human who is destined to awaken as the physical form of Oguvi, the goddess reborn on this world." Aiza shook her head adamantly. "That's totally crazy. I'm just a normal girl. This has to be some wild dream I'm having." "I assure you it is very real," the Shitari said grimly. "The glowing lines underneath your skin that look like veins are proof that the spirit of Oguvi lies dormant within your body. The time has arrived for you to fully accept and embrace your destined role." Aiza looked down at her arm and could indeed see the eerie pulsing blue glow just below the surface of her skin, like visible veins, but glowing. A cold chill went down her spine. Long ago, in the ancient times, my Shitari kind watched over and protected Oguvi's jungles and the sacred river, alongside the mermaids who lived in the waters. The massive guardian continued. We all lived together in peace and harmony as the spiritual guardians of the land, river, and nature. Its huge fists clenched tightly. But then the human settlers came to this region, and they saw us as nothing but monsters that should be hunted and killed. After centuries of violent warfare between humans and Asgardians, Oguvi made a terrible sacrifice to try to save those of us who remained. Aiza listened raptly, still having trouble believing anything the Shitari was telling her was real, yet also feeling deep down that it spoke the truth. Oguvi split her living spirit essence into two parts, the Guardian explained. One half she embedded into the body of a human female who was a direct descendant of her bloodline, and the other half of her spirit essence remained here in this sacred jungle, granting us the magic to erect cloaking barriers that have hidden us away from the human world all this time. It leaned forward intensely, locking its large amber eyes on Aiza. "You are the living reincarnation of that sacred human bloodline, carrying half of Oguvi's spirit within you over all these generations. If you were to reunite her split halves by fully awakening her spirit essence inside your body, you could restore Oguvi as the all-powerful river goddess reborn into human form." Aziza's head spun as she tried to process this utterly unbelievable revelation about her apparent destiny and spiritual importance. Some part of her still refused to actually believe any of it could possibly be real. But the evidence was right there for her to see, glowing under her very skin. "So, just say I actually do have this goddess's spirit inside me somehow," Aiza said carefully, trying to wrap her mind around it. "What would happen if I did this reawaken thing you're talking about? What would it mean for me? What would I have to do?" The Shitari's expression grew very somber. "If you reunited Oguvi's spirit and awakened as her human avatar form, you would become an immortal living embodiment of the river goddess herself. Your existence would be eternally intertwined with her sacred river, jungles, and all of nature under her dominion. With your human form restraining and containing a portion of Oguvi's infinite power, you could walk the surface world as her corporeal representative and enforcer, carrying out her will and mandate to defend the natural world." It let those heavy words sink in for a moment before adding, "Embracing such a role would, of course, require you to permanently sever all ties to your former human life, family, friends, and pursuits. They would have to be left behind forever once you fully took on your new responsibilities as the awakened avatar of Oguvi reborn." Aziza's breath caught in her throat as she tried to imagine such an existence. Never again seeing her parents, her younger brother, or any of her friends and loved ones. Having to give up any normal human dreams, ambitions, or living experiences she might have had. All in order to become some kind of all-powerful nature goddess warrior figure. It was overwhelming even to consider. But before Aiza could sort through her flying thoughts and emotions enough to respond, a sudden hair-raising shriek echoed from somewhere outside the cave entrance. The Shitari immediately tensed, rising up again to its full towering height in alarm. "The mermaids have found us here," it growled, its voice echoing through the room. "They want to catch you before you can become Oguvi's avatar. They plan to use her power to control both the humans on land and in the water for their own purposes." More shrieks answered the first one, joined by a sickening wet flapping and slapping sound that was rapidly drawing nearer. Aiza felt panic clawing at her chest as her breathing became shallow and rapid. Without warning, the Shitari scooped her up effortlessly in one of its massive hair-covered arms, cradling her close to its barrel chest with surprising gentleness, given its immense size and strength. "We must flee at once, child," it told her urgently. "The mermaid's rage and vengeance against Oguvi's heirs knows no bounds or limits. I will keep you safe and guard you with my life until you decide your own path, whether that is to heed the call and embrace your destiny as the awakened embodiment of the goddess, or to turn away from it all and return to your former human life." Holding Aiza tightly, the Shitari ran quickly through a small tunnel at the back of the cave. They got out just in time, as a group of scary mermaid-like creatures slithered in through the main entrance. Aiza saw many eel-like monsters with big, sharp teeth. Their wide mouths opened and snapped, making a scary hissing sound as they smelled their prey. Even more frightening, their eel-like bodies moved smoothly over the cave floor, even though they had no legs, moving fast towards them. Aiza tried hard to keep quiet as the mermaid-like creatures got closer. She followed the Shitari quickly through the twisting underground tunnel. She knew that if she made even one scared sound, those creatures would find them right away, their awful cries echoing through the tight space. They kept turning through one tunnel after another, and Aiza had no way to know where they were going. The air got worse and worse as they went deeper underground. Aiza held onto the Shitari, her eyes closed against the complete darkness around them. Only their heavy breathing and the Shitari's loud footsteps broke the silence. Then, a scary screech came from far behind them. The mermaid-like creatures were still chasing, using their sharp senses to follow. The Shitari moved faster, rushing through the darkness towards somewhere unknown. Suddenly, a little light showed up ahead. As they got closer, Aiza saw a huge cave with tall, rocky walls. A big pool of water glowed faintly in the middle, with a small stream feeding it. Without stopping, the Shitari jumped into the freezing water, pulling Aiza under. She squeezed her eyes shut again, trying not to gasp as the icy water surrounded them. They seemed to swim forever before the Shitari kicked up, surfacing in a smaller cave dimly lit by glowing mushrooms. "We'll be safe here for now," the Shitari rumbled, pulling itself onto a ledge and gently setting Aiza down. "But the mermaids won't stop until they find you." "What are we going to do?" Aiza panted, pushing her wet hair from her eyes. The Shitari's eyes looked very serious. "You must fully wake up Oguvi's spirit inside you. Only with her power can you hope to drive back the mermaid's forces." It held out an old staff, decorated with glowing gems. When the Shitari held it, the runes flashed green, lighting up the cave with an eerie green glow. "You must become Oguvi's human form, her living self, to protect this land." Aiza looked at the ancient being, barely understanding the huge responsibility given to her. But the urgent look in its eyes showed her there was no other choice. The entrance to the cave shook with huge impacts, like massive things hitting it from outside. The Shitari tensed, raising its staff as more crashes echoed. Aiza clutched her chest as Oguvi's essence inside her responded, ready to be reborn. A loud and terrifying scream filled the cave, announcing the arrival of the mermaid-like creature's elite monsters. Determination filled the Shitari's eyes. "Get ready, child," it said seriously. "The fight for this land is about to begin." From the tunnel entrance, a giant wriggling creature started to come out. It looked like a huge eel, 50 feet long, with a mouth big enough to swallow a horse. Rows of sharp teeth lined its jaws. More scary creatures slithered out behind it, just as monstrous. The Shitari sent out a bright green light from its staff, pushing the mermaid-like creatures back. "Aiza, you must act now!" it shouted. "Open yourself to Oguvi's power!" Aiza froze, unable to believe how crazy this was. How could she, a normal teenage girl, ever become an all-powerful nature goddess? The lead monster lunged forward, dodging the Shitari's staff blast. Its wide-open mouth and sharp tongues reached for Aiza. She scrambled back, pressing against the cave wall. At that moment, she felt something deep inside her unlock. The glowing lines under her skin blazed bright blue. Oguvi's ancient awareness filled Aziza's mind. Power surged through her veins as the sacred river's unstoppable essence joined with her very being. Aiza stood up, her eyes shining like bright blue oceans. With a sweep of her arm, bright blue energy tendrils lashed out, catching the lead monster's tongues and flinging it back. The mermaid-like creatures recoiled from Aziza's newfound power. She felt Oguvi's control over the waterways and life of this land flow through her. "I am the Avatar," Aziza's voice rang out with the unmistakable tone of the awakened river goddess. "And this land is mine to protect." With an upraised hand, she called forth a massive water tendril from the cave pool, lashing it against the tunnel mouth and causing the stone to crack. The Shitari quickly raised a shield as the cave began to collapse inward, cutting off the mermaid-like creature's path. For now, they were safe. But Aiza knew this was only the start of an ancient conflict reborn. Aiza was now at home again, with her mum, dad, and brother. She was no longer thinking about the strange things that happened in the woods that she wanted to tell her family about. Aiza said to them, "That's all I remember. Maybe what I said in the hospital about Kamari and the river goddess was important, but I don't fully get it yet. I'm sure I met a mermaid at the river who wanted to kill me and take my powers. I also remember seeing the Shitari, who helped me find the power inside me." Her father shook his head. "Aiza, you were so dehydrated in those woods. Who knows what you really saw? This monster and jungle talk has to stop." But Aiza insisted it was all real, and the monster showing up in their home proved the evil forces were after her again, though she didn't know why. The family argued a lot. Aziza's parents thought she had a mental breakdown in the jungle that made her imagine everything. Surprisingly, Raj took his sister's side, saying he saw the creature too, so it had to be real somehow. Finally, Aziza's mother burst into tears. "I don't care what's real or not. I just want to protect my family from whatever terrible forces are here." That night, strange noises came from Aziza's room. Her parents rushed in to find her missing from bed. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the house. They ran downstairs and saw Aiza being dragged out the front door by something invisible. Raj tried to grab her, but was thrown back by an unseen force. Their mother fainted as the front door slammed shut, leaving only Aziza's terrified screams. In panic and tears, her father called the police right away, fearing the worst, that his daughter had been kidnapped, or even worse fate. Officers searched the house and the area around it, but found no signs of a break-in or struggle. It was as if Aiza had vanished into thin air, just like she had described, happening to her in the cursed jungle months earlier. When the police could not find Aiza, her very worried parents thought that maybe evil forces from the ancient jungle that their daughter talked about had finally taken her. They did not understand everything, but they knew that powerful bad magic was involved. Against their better judgment, they found a local witch doctor named Mama Shibanga, who claimed to know about the supernatural, occult, and African folklore. Many people recommended her, even though her practices were mysterious. "Please, you must help us," begged Aiza's mother when Mama Shibanga came to their home. "Evil spirits have taken our daughter. We don't know what kind of dark forces are at work." The old witch doctor looked them over with her clouded eyes as she entered. "I see. So the signs were true. The ancient river goddess's cursed bloodline has been awakened again." She slowly walked through the house, running her bony fingers along surfaces and muttering words under her breath that they could not understand. Aiza's parents followed behind, unsure what to make of Mama Shibanga's strange methods. Finally, the witch doctor stopped in Aiza's bedroom and crouched down to look at some small scuff marks on the floor that the police had missed. "Yes, I understand now," Mama Shibanga whispered. "Your daughter's spiritual power was very great, the reborn river goddess's powers in human form. Such light was too tempting for the jungle's dark forces." She turned to Aiza's parents, her face serious. "They have taken her to the legendary river's breath, a secret cursed place where the boundary between this world and the next is torn apart. Your daughter is trapped in a hellish in-between realm, being forcibly made part of the jungle's evil group of river undead." Aiza's parents were confused and scared. Mama Shibanga explained more. "You see, a long time ago, the river goddess ruled these lands along with the human people, but their powers were misused, and the evil forces deep in the jungle killed the goddess. To punish the river people for turning away from her, the goddess put a bad curse on those left when she died. They would become undead river beings. Their bodies would slowly rot and melt until their spirits were taken by the river waters." Aiza's father's eyes went wide. "Are you saying these evil jungle spirits turned our little girl into some kind of rotting river zombie?" Mama Shibanga slowly nodded. "I'm afraid that is exactly their plan, though she would stay undead, serving their evil plans forever as a corrupted version of the reborn river goddess." Aiza's mother burst into tears, her cries echoing through the house. How could such evil forces exist to torment their innocent family like this? Her father pulled himself together, determination hardening his face. "Please, there must be some way to save our Aiza from this fate. To bring her back normal before she becomes one of these undead monsters." The witch doctor looked thoughtful for a moment. Finally, she nodded and said, "There is one way, dangerous and unlikely to work, but still a way. You must join me in going to the river's breath place itself on the night of the next new moon. There, we may have one chance to talk to the lingering spirit of the river goddess and beg her to take back her reborn power before it becomes corrupted." Aiza's parents exchanged a determined look and nodded together. They would risk any danger to save their daughter's soul from eternal damnation. Over the next few weeks leading up to the new moon, Mama Shibanga taught Aiza's parents basic defensive spells and rituals meant to temporarily shield them from the dark jungle forces. She also had them take part in daily cleansing rituals, burning special herbs and chanting to clear their spirits of fear, so they would be mentally ready for the hellish journey into the river's breath. When the night of the new moon finally arrived, Mama Shibanga led them deep into the most isolated section of the woods outside the city, guiding them along a hidden trail only she could see. "We must move quickly and in total silence," the witch doctor warned in a hushed voice as they crept through the inky darkness, their path lit only by her bobbing lantern. "The jungle's eyes and ears are everywhere." Aiza's parents exchanged nervous looks, their hearts thumping with every snapped twig under their feet. They could feel the jungle's sinister presence all around them, growing more intense with each step. After what felt like hours of tense walking through suffocating plants, Mama Shibanga stopped abruptly, holding up her hand to halt them. She pointed ahead silently. In the distance, through a rotting break in the ancient trees, they could see the river current rapidly churning and bubbling in unnatural ways. Strange, colourful lights flickered and glowed from under the water's surface. "There," Mama Shibanga whispered grimly. "The river's breath. A tear where this world meets the undead plain. The outer edges of the jungle's domain, where your daughter now suffers unimaginable torment." Aiza's parents stared at the haunting alien river in stunned silence, their hearts sinking with grim realization of what lay ahead. The witch doctor turned to face them, her features hardened by deadly seriousness. "From this point on, there is no path but through the river itself. You will be stepping directly into the dwelling of the darkest, most vicious supernatural evils. The jungle's undead prowl endlessly in the waters, looking for fresh souls to consume and corrupt into their vile tribe." She held up an amulet made of bones and river rocks, chanting secret words over it to fill it with protective magic. When she finished, Mama Shibanga handed it to Aiza's father. "This amulet will shield your spirit from being trapped in the river's waters and falling into their dark grasp. You must bind it around your chests as we cross. No matter what, do not let go of each other's hands or you will become separated. And once apart in this place, the undead river fiends will descend upon you without mercy." Aiza's parents agreed, ready to do anything to get their daughter back. They took off their shoes and socks, tied the charm around their chests as told, and followed Mama Shibanga into the warm, cursed river. As soon as their legs went under, it felt like 1,000,000 claws and teeth were scratching their skin, leaving red marks and making them bleed. Mama Shibanga held their hands firmly and led them forward, calmly chanting protection words. They waded deeper into the churning river, with every scary step. Suddenly, terrifying screams and cries came from under the muddy water as they went further in. Dark shapes twisted in gross ways just under the surface around them. Aiza's mother whimpered, squeezing her husband's hand tighter as they pushed on determinedly. The hellish noise grew louder, joined by wet slapping sounds, as if creepy creatures were rising from the riverbed. Then, the first undead river monster surfaced in front of them, its twisted, human-like form decaying as it stared at the intruders with soulless eyes. More and more undead beings came up, clawing at them with long nails and lashing rancid tongues through drooling mouths filled with jagged teeth. Mama Shibanga shouted over the deafening noise, saying ancient banishing words that made the river fiends shriek and temporarily retreat. But they would only stay back as long as the chant continued. Hours seemed to crawl by in this nightmare, the family struggling hard to keep the ritual going as the endless hordes surrounded them from all sides, clawing and grabbing. The cold water turned red from their bleeding wounds as the undead horde closed in. Mama Shibanga chanted more frantically, sweating hard from the effort of holding off the ravenous fiends. Just as the protective spell seemed about to fail, a blinding emerald light burst from the river depths, making the undead masses recoil and shriek in pain. The dazzling glow intensified, revealing the graceful shape of a female figure made entirely of shimmering water. "The river goddess," Mama Shibanga said in awe, stopping her chant. The watery apparition faced them, features becoming clearer. It was Aiza, or at least her spiritual essence. She opened her mouth, and an ethereal voice echoed around them. "My reborn human form has been captured and tainted by the darkest underwater evils. You have braved their vile realm to find me." Aiza's mother cried out desperately, "Please, mighty goddess, you must purge the evil from our daughter and let her soul return to us." The river goddess's watery form crackled with energy as she responded. To do so now would disrupt the very balance of life and death itself. She has been too integrated into their twisted tribe. Aiza's father pleaded loudly, "There has to be a way. We'll sacrifice anything, pay any price to make her whole again." The goddess thought for a while before answering. "There is one last choice, a special ritual to put Aiza's living spirit and my own energy into a single new body, one that can be born from you to live in the physical world again, free from the underworld." The family quickly agreed, even though the goddess's words were confusing. She gave them instructions on doing an ancient ritual to prepare for the spirit transfer. As Mama Shibanga hurriedly led them through the steps, gathering strange ingredients from the river bottom, the undead creatures held back by the goddess's bright light stared hungrily, creeping closer. Finally, the ritual was complete. Aiza's mother gasped in pain and shock as a protective glowing bubble violently expanded from her stomach. Inside it, a tiny shining orb taking human shape. "It is done," the river goddess said, her brightness shining brighter than the sun. "I hereby give you this new life to cherish and protect. Your daughter Aiza, reborn, filled with my own eternal energy to guide her. Raise her in my ways from now on." With those final words, the goddess's blinding energy streamed into the mystical orb. The bubble pulsed outward in a shockwave of force, violently pushing the undead masses back into the haunted river depths. When it finally dimmed, Aiza's parents opened their eyes to find the small orb had become a healthy newborn baby cradled in Mama Shibanga's arms, surrounded by dazzling lights. The baby cooed and giggled, seeming completely peaceful. A tear rolled down the witch doctor's cheek as she looked at the miracle, carefully handing the reborn Aiza to her crying parents. They hugged the new life tightly, finally letting go of the traumas and fears from their scary journey. Though they had many questions about their daughter's incredible new existence, one thing was clear: her radiant spirit was going to change the world. Aiza opened her eyes, feeling confused. She found herself in a dimly lit room with a musty smell in the air. Her head hurt, and she couldn't remember how she got there. The last thing she recalled was being at home with her family, getting ready for bed. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed strange markings on the walls, complicated symbols that seemed to pulse with an eerie glow. A chill went down her spine as she realized she was in some kind of ritual room. Suddenly, a figure came out of the shadows, its face hidden by a hooded cloak. "Welcome back, Aiza," a raspy voice said. "Or should I say, welcome to the truth." Aiza tried to speak, but her throat was dry, and all that came out was a croak. The cloaked figure chuckled. "I can see the confusion in your eyes. Let me explain. The life you thought you knew, the memories of you being chosen by the river goddess, it was all an illusion, a made-up story created by my magic." Aiza's heart raced as the figure's words sank in. Her entire existence, everything she had believed in, was a lie. "You see, Aiza, I am the Time Weaver, a being that can control the very fabric of reality," the figure continued. "And you, my dear, are caught in an endless loop, a cycle of deception that I have created for my own amusement." Aiza tried to make sense of it all, but her mind was spinning. She had thought she was destined for greatness, to guide humanity with the river goddess's power. But now, she realized she had been nothing more than a pawn in some twisted game. The Time Weaver came closer, its presence overwhelming. "You have lived countless lifetimes, experienced countless rebirths, each one more horrific than the last. And yet you never seem to learn, never seem to break free from my web of lies." Aiza's heart sank as flashes of memories, or were they illusions, flooded her mind. Visions of herself as a rotting undead creature, trapped in the depths of the cursed river. Glimpses of herself as a sacrifice, her life brutally taken away in rituals. Each memory more terrifying than the last. The Time Weaver seemed to enjoy her despair, its raspy laughter echoing through the room. "But don't be afraid, Aiza. This cycle is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning." With a wave of its hand, the markings on the walls began to glow, and Aiza felt an invisible force pulling at her very soul. She tried to scream, but no sound came out as she felt herself being ripped apart, her soul torn to pieces. The last thing she saw was the Time Weaver's twisted smile, its inhuman eyes glinting with cruel delight. And then, darkness. And a cloaked figure muttered, "The time loop continues, child." Aiza blinked her eyes open, finding herself back in her bedroom. She sat up in bed, looking around in confusion. Hadn't she just been in the cursed river with her parents, reborn as a new life with the river goddess's power? Her door opened, and her mother walked in with a warm smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead. Time to get ready for school." Aiza was baffled. "School? But what about the jungle, the undead? I'm the reborn river goddess now." Her mother laughed. "You and your wild dreams, come on, you'll be late." As her mother left, Aiza felt a chill run down her spine. Something wasn't right. She got dressed in a daze, her mind replaying the visions of the harrowing night at the cursed river over and over. At the breakfast table, her father ruffled her hair affectionately. "Looking out of it this morning, kiddo? Did you have those jungle dreams again?" Aiza looked at him, feeling uneasy. "Dreams? No, it was all real. We went into the river's breath, called the river goddess, and she was reborn into me as a new life." Her parents exchanged a worried look. "Honey, I think you've been having too much fun with those storybooks," her mother said kindly. Before Aiza could argue more, her brother Raj came running down the stairs. "Come on, sis. The bus is here, we'll be late." He gave her a teasing grin. "What's wrong? Did the dinosaurs get you again last night?" Aiza followed him out in a confused daze, looking back at her parents' concerned faces. She was certain her visions of magic and becoming the reborn river goddess were real, not dreams. So why was everyone acting like nothing happened? At school, Aiza couldn't focus on lessons as she puzzled over her seemingly dual existence. She kept zoning out, seeing visions of bloody river waters and undead creatures flashing in her mind. Finally, the last bell rang for the day. Aiza numbly followed students out to the buses, still wrestling with the idea that maybe her vivid jungle experiences were just her imagination. Suddenly, a loud scream made Aiza's head snap up. Students all around were screaming and running away in terror. She froze as a gross, waterlogged dead body shuffled into view. An undead river creature straight from her visions. Its slimy body was covered in weeds and oozing gashes. Empty eye sockets locked onto Aiza as it opened its mouth, letting out a gurgling moan that chilled her blood. Paralyzed by shock and fear, Aiza stood still as the undead monster lurched towards her with rotten bony arms outstretched. It grabbed her shoulders, pulling her close enough for its putrid breath to choke her. "You are the key," it wheezed. "The time loop will never be broken." Aiza's mind reeled, trying to make sense of its cryptic words. Before she could react, a blinding light flashed, and she felt a powerful force yank her backwards. She gasped, finding herself back in her bedroom as if nothing happened. Aiza looked around wildly, her heart racing. The creature's gurgling voice echoed in her mind. The time loop will never be broken. What did it mean? Was she truly stuck in some kind of endless cycle, or just having another vivid dream? Aiza racked her brain, trying to figure out what was real. Over the next few days, the cycle repeated itself endlessly. Aiza would wake up, go through her usual routine with family, then get sent into a spiral by some paranormal event linked to her jungle visions. One morning, her brother morphed into a grotesque river zombie at breakfast before her eyes, his skin melting off as he gurgled for help. Another day, Aiza's desk at school came alive with slimy vines that lashed out and bound her, while unearthly whispers taunted, "Join us." Each time the horror would peak, then cut off with a flash of light, resetting back to Aiza's bedroom like nothing occurred. The sights and sounds haunted her relentlessly. Awake and asleep, Aiza saw visions of the cursed river, the gnarled trees in mist, the shuffling corpses crawling from the depths pursuing her. It felt so real, like a penetrating glimpse into the truths behind her strange existence. Desperate for answers, Aiza turned to books on African myths at the library. She pored over tales depicting the legends of the ancient river goddess and the cursed underworld realms. As the time loops repeated endlessly, Aiza began seeing the same strange events happening repeatedly out of the corner of her eye, like glitches overlaying her current reality. A quick shadow across the room, a weird shape darting through trees outside, a peal of strange laughter just on the edge of hearing. These weird things happened more and more often, until one day Aiza looked up from her library books to find her surroundings had changed into a twisted, hellish version of the library. Shelves went on endlessly in hallways of fire and shadow. Books were alive with slimy ooze and wriggling worms. Outside the windows, a jungle of dead, twisted trees under a sickly red sky. Aiza gasped, stumbling back from the gross scene. A raspy chuckle made her whirl around to see a hunched, skinny figure cloaked in shadow watching her with beady eyes. What's happening?" she stammered, fear gripping her chest. The strange being threw back its head, cackling loudly in an unsettling, wheezy way. "Why, I'm simply showing you what's behind the curtain, young goddess." Its wild eyes glinted with cruel glee. "The time loops trapping your tiny mind are my creation. You are just a disposable pawn in an ages-old game between this reality and the next." Its voice dropped to a sinister rasp. "I am the Time Weaver, a cosmic force that balances the delicate threads of time and space across dimensional lines. You and your reborn river goddess spirit are a dangerous abnormality that endangered my pattern. So I have unraveled and rewoven your existences on a hellish loom." The Time Weaver threw wide its arms, its skeletal form flickering between bizarre angles unlike normal space. You are trapped in layered cycles of space-time repetitions that slowly corrupt your grasp on concrete truth. Each loop pulls you further away from what you think is reality, until your sanity unravels completely. It laughed again, a shrill, grating sound that made Aziza's skin crawl. Eventually, your whole concept of existence will deteriorate into a nightmare continuum from which your spirit essence can then be absorbed into my cosmic loom to maintain the terrifying balance. Aiza trembled, trying to process its maddening words. So the river goddess rebirth, the supernatural encounters, her perceived normal life, it had all been artificial fabrications in service of this godlike being's twisted aims. But why me? She pleaded, her voice shaking. I didn't do anything wrong. What balance needs my eternal torment like this? The Time Weaver fixed her with its flinty gaze, amusement gone from its eyes. You are an immense cosmic power reborn into mortal flesh, a force that could rewrite reality itself if allowed to grow unchecked. It said gravely, imagine entire planets, galaxies, or even whole space-time continuums being torn apart by your tumultuous awakening. My duty is to control such wild energies by any means necessary. Its form flickered disturbingly. Look around you, child. This library is just one layer of convoluted time loops I have crafted to eternally subjugate your rogue essence. There are dimensions within dimensions here, trapping you in a paradoxical, fraying hell of my design. Aiza felt tears of terror and despair sliding down her cheeks. Was she doomed to slowly lose her identity in an infinite spiral of mind-bending cycles created by this merciless cosmic being? The Time Weaver regarded her coldly. Do not weep, child. Your torment is a small price to pay for maintaining the cosmic balance. You should feel honored that your decimated essence will serve as threads woven into the very fabric of reality itself. With a twisting gesture of its withered hands, the library warped and contorted around them in dizzying ways. Aiza clutched her head, vertigo and nausea overwhelming her as the hellish scene liquefied and reformed in rapid, nightmarish iterations. No, please stop, she croaked weakly, her mind splintering under the sensory onslaught. The Time Weaver only cackled louder, its form blurring into impossible shapes. Your pleas are meaningless. You cannot begin to understand the scale of cosmic order I uphold here. All of existence itself would unravel without my constant realigning of the threads of space-time. Its laughter grew more shrill and distorted as the library melted away, replaced by a twisting cyclotronic vortex of fire and shadow. Phantom images and reversed timeline echoes flickered at the edges of the kaleidoscopic spiral all around them. Behold the infinite rift, the nexus point where all cosmic strings converge and realign. The Time Weaver's echoing voice seemed to issue from every direction at once. Here is where your decimated spirit essence will finally become one with the source that binds all of creation into balance. Aiza could only watch helplessly, her senses overloaded as the maddening vortex's pull grew stronger. She felt her body, mind, and soul being shredded apart by paradoxical forces from fractured realities. As her very essence fragmented down to the subatomic level, Aziza's last lucid thought cried out in spiritual agony. Why? What sin could warrant such a horrific cosmic-scale fate? Was the awakening of the river goddess's power within her truly so catastrophic that it justified this eternal torment and obliteration of her entire being? Just as her consciousness reached its limit and began to shatter, a brilliant light pierced the heart of the vortex. A golden radiance flooded Aziza's fading vision, coalescing into the ethereal outline of a divine feminine figure. The river goddess herself had returned to reclaim her chosen human. "Enough, Time Weaver!" Her thunderous voice reverberated across planes of existence. "You overstep your role as space-time's watchkeeper. This innocent child shall not be your loom thread while I still draw breath." The cosmic vortex swirling around them shuddered violently as the two nigh-omnipotent forces clashed. Reality itself groaned under the metaphysical strain as the river goddess and the Time Weaver grappled for Aziza's fragmented essence. Just before Aziza's consciousness winked out completely, she felt the river flow of pure, primal energy engulf her in a massive surge of power, leaving the cosmic battlefield hanging in the balance as Aziza's spirit reformed on a vast plane of possibility. Aziza woke up sweating in her small hut. She had a bad nightmare. In the dream, a scary creature called the Time Weaver was trapping her in never-ending time loops. He made her live through gross and horrible scenes over and over, like being surrounded by zombie monsters from an evil river. Aziza looked around her dim hut, relieved to be back home in the village of Agimo, where she lived with her parents and brother Raj. It was just a bad dream, she told herself, taking deep breaths to calm down. The next day, Aziza tried to do her normal daily chores and routines like usual, but she couldn't stop thinking about that vivid nightmare. Why did it feel so real? And who was that Time Weaver creature? That evening, after finishing her chores, Aziza decided to get some water from the nearby river. Maybe the peaceful river sounds would help clear her troubled mind. As the sun was setting over the jungle trees, Aziza walked along the familiar dirt path to the riverbank. She loved this spot where she had played since being a little girl. The cool air smelled nice like damp earth and river water. Aziza dipped her clay jar into the slow-moving water to fill it. As she did, she noticed some faint shimmering, as if something was moving just beneath the surface. All of a sudden, a strange figure burst out of the river right in front of her. Aziza gasped and stumbled backwards in shock. It was a human-like creature, but its body was covered in shimmering green-blue scales like a fishtail. It had a striking masculine face with high cheekbones and glowing eyes. "Do not be afraid, Aziza," the mer creature said in a deep, calming voice. "I am the River Keeper, guardian spirit of these waters. I mean you no harm." Aziza's mouth hung open in amazement. The childhood stories of river spirits were real. The River Keeper looked at her intensely but kindly. "I can see you have had visions and dreams not meant for humans," he said seriously. "The Time Weaver's tricks have reached into your soul to try to shatter your destiny before it can awaken." Aziza shivered at hearing that terrible Time Weaver name. "You know about the Time Weaver. Please tell me what's happening. Why is he tormenting me with nightmares?" The River Keeper's scaled tail flicked slowly as he carefully chose his words. "You are a human child, blessed with the primal spirit of Oguvi, the ancient river goddess of this land. Your dreams and visions are glimpses of your true cosmic origins struggling to return." He looked at Aziza with those glowing eyes. "I am thousands of years old, child, and I have seen the great forces battling for control over this realm. Your rebirth as the human form of the river goddess has reignited that ancient struggle between the creative forces of life and the opposing forces of decay and stillness controlled by the Time Weaver." Aziza felt overwhelmed by the creature's heavy words. So her wild dreams weren't just dreams. She was somehow at the center of an ancient cosmic conflict. The River Keeper continued his tale. You see, when this world was created, Oguvi, the river goddess, made the lush, life-giving jungle realm and all its creatures. Her nurturing, creative waters flowed freely across the virgin land, surrounding it with fertile energy and vibrant life force. Ancient visions shimmered in the river beside them, a dense jungle paradise full of vibrant plants and animals, with crystal-clear waters running through it. This became known as the Verdant Realm, an early time of divine creation and uncontrolled growth. Oguvi's cosmic waters flowed pure and unspoiled for thousands of centuries. But then, the river keeper looked very serious, and the pictures in the wavy stream changed to show bad things. At first, Oguvi's endless creation was okay, but after some time, it started to mess up the balance of the whole universe. The opposite force of death, rot, and limits, called the Time Weaver, woke up and ruined Oguvi's work, trying to keep things stable no matter what. Aiza saw gross images of dead nature and dead bodies rising from dirty, weedy rivers as the river keeper spoke. The Time Weaver turned Oguvi's pretty garden into a gross, smelly, dead realm. He sent out armies of undead monsters and plagues to stop Oguvi's wild growth in the green realm. What used to be paradise became the poisoned old Deathlands because of their never-ending opposite sides fighting. It was creation versus strict limits and rot. Aiza shuddered, feeling sick from the terrible scenes. So her nightmares about undead monsters from the cursed river were real after all. And this went on forever, the river keeper continued seriously. The unstoppable growing forces of life in Gusavi, opposed by the Time Weaver's relentless death, rot, and strict limits on change. A cycle with no end and no winner on either side. Aiza frowned, confused. But if they were perfect opposites, destined to eternally clash and cancel each other, then how did I get reborn as Oguvi's avatar and end up caught in between? The great fish creature looked very sad. Ah, that is where this epic struggle takes an unexpected turn, young goddess. You see, during a pivotal cycle between Oguvi and the Time Weaver, your mortal self was meant to be reborn into this world as the full reincarnation of Oguvi herself, destined to bring a new, evolved age for our realm. The Riverkeeper looked ashamed. However, I failed in protecting you during a critical time, and the Time Weaver sneaked in and disrupted your rebirth just as you were being reborn across time-space. With one nasty trick, he shattered you, the living form of the Mother Goddess, across infinite parallel realities, splintering your spirit into countless fractured pieces. Aiza felt a strange, hollow feeling in her chest, an ancient pain trying to come into her mind. The river spirit looked very serious. In that one horrific act, the Time Weaver doomed you to a fractured, never-ending cycle of false rebirth across different realities. Your true destiny as this world's life-giver and guide of growth was torn apart, with each of your splinters being born in many realities, only to be endlessly reabsorbed by the Time Weaver's decaying forces. The images in the river became dizzying and painful for Aiza, 1,000 versions of herself flashing in and out of existence, only to disappear or unmade in the next moment. She felt a throbbing in her head as more and more partial memories and gut punches of cosmic agony tried to surface from her subconscious. My deepest failure, the Riverkeeper said heavily, was that I could do nothing to stop the shattering of your avatar across the dimensional planes. I could only helplessly watch cycle after cycle as the Time Weaver continually corrupted and absorbed the pieces of your destined rebirth, feeding his craving for stagnation and preventing the life renaissance you were meant to unleash. He looked pained. Hence your nightmares and visions of horrific time loops, child. You have been subconsciously sensing and reacting to the echoes of your cosmic struggle bleeding through from other realities where the Time Weaver still attacks your fractured spirit forms. Your dreams are fragmented glimpses of your true nature and origins, as well as terrifying futures where the destruction of your avatar ensures the Deathland's rule rather than the Green Realm's rebirth. Aziza's head was spinning from the Riverkeeper's heavy explanations. So she was the reincarnation of an ancient goddess? And this evil Time Weaver creature had shattered her soul into pieces across multiple realities to stop her from bringing new life. Why would he do something so terrible? Aziza asked, her voice small. The great fish creature's tail lashed around angrily. The Time Weaver's only purpose is to enforce cosmic order and stagnation through decay and limitation. Your destiny as the reborn river goddess was to spark a renaissance of unlimited growth and transformation across this realm. Such rapid, primal, evolutionary change represented an existential threat to the Time Weaver's monopoly on keeping the universal scales balanced toward decay. Aziza felt tears welling up. So he just decided to make me suffer eternal torment across endless realities, to stop me from bringing positive change. The Riverkeeper nodded solemnly. I'm afraid so, young goddess. The cycles of brutal subjugation you've endured in nightmarish dreamscapes are but tiny fragments compared to the ages of anguish the Time Weaver has put your greater, shattered self through. His depravity and lack of empathy for your cosmic spirit know no limits. Despair washed over Aziza. If this ancient, almost all-powerful force of cosmic decay had truly damned her to perpetual splintered agonies across countless realities, what hope did one mortal child have to overcome that? As if sensing her overwhelming feelings, the Riverkeeper placed a large, comforting hand on her shoulder. Do not surrender to darkness yet, Aziza. Your journey has only just reawakened. He looked at her with those intense, glowing eyes. The very fact that you are becoming consciously aware of your greater origins and destiny is a sliver of light in the Time Weaver's stranglehold over you. It means your mortal incarnation is beginning to resonate with and reintegrate the fragmented splinters of your cosmic spirit across realities. Aziza blinked up at him in surprise. You mean I can somehow still fulfill my destiny, even after being torn apart across infinite realms? The great fish creature nodded firmly. Indeed, child, though the road will be filled with more danger than you can possibly imagine. The Time Weaver's forces and deathly minions will use every deception and subjugation in their power to abort your awakening rebirth. The next morning after meeting the Riverkeeper, Aziza woke up feeling strange. She had many new big ideas in her head. Was she really the rebirth of an ancient goddess? Was an evil monster called the Time Weaver trying to stop her important destiny? Aziza did her chores, but she couldn't stop thinking about what the Riverkeeper told her. She felt small and powerless compared to the big cosmic battle he described. How could one village girl overcome such mighty forces? That afternoon, Aziza decided to collect firewood in the jungle, hoping the fresh air might clear her troubled mind. She walked along the familiar forest paths, listening to chirping birds and rustling leaves. The warm sun shone through the leaves in dappled patterns. Up ahead, Aziza noticed an area where the trees seemed disturbed and broken, as if something had recently crashed through them. Curious, she went to investigate. As she got closer, she heard a faint groaning sound. Aziza gasped when she found a young man lying on the ground, clutching his leg, which was bent at a strange angle. He had tanned skin, deep brown eyes, and neatly trimmed black hair. Despite his pain, Aiza could tell he was very handsome. "Oh, no! You're hurt!" she cried, rushing over. "What happened?" The young man looked up at Aiza, his eyes wide. In a strained voice, he said, "Please, you have to help me. I was traveling and got attacked by wild animals. They broke my leg." Aiza looked at his leg and believed his story. She knew she couldn't just leave him there. "Don't worry, I'll get help." She ran back to her village as fast as she could. Soon, Aiza returned with her brother Raj and some other men from the village. They made a simple stretcher from sturdy branches and carried the young man back to Agimo. The healer tended to his leg, binding it tightly in a splint. Over the next few days, the young man had to stay in a hut, resting and healing. Aiza couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious stranger. She felt pity for his painful injury. One afternoon, Aiza decided to bring him some fresh fruit. She peeked her head through the hut doorway. "Hello? Are you awake? I brought you something to eat." The young man looked up and gave Aiza a dazzling smile that made her heart skip a beat. Up close, she realized he was only a few years older than her, maybe 16 or 17 years old. "Please, come in." Aiza shyly entered, setting down the plate of bananas and mangoes. "There you go. I'm Aiza from this village. I'm the one who found you in the jungle." "Thank you for your kindness, Aiza," the young man said graciously. "My name is Kiran. I was on a journey traveling between villages when I was attacked by wild beasts. You saved my life." "It was nothing," Aiza mumbled, finding herself transfixed by Kiran's deep brown eyes. There was something mysterious and alluring about him. She found herself wanting to keep talking to him. "So where were you journeying from?" "My home village is Kalunda, 2 weeks' walk south of here," Kiran explained. "I was making a pilgrimage to the Great Western River to cleanse my spirit." Aiza leaned forward, intrigued. Mention of the Great Western River made her think of the Riverkeeper's tales. "Is that an important ritual for your village?" Kiran nodded solemnly. "Indeed, we are taught from birth to honor and respect the power of the sacred Western River. Its life-giving flow nourishes and renews us." His gaze grew distant and reverent. "I had hoped to bathe in its timeless waters and be reborn pure." Aiza felt a strange sense of connection with this exotic young man. Perhaps it was a piece of her deeper cosmic identity, recognizing a kindred spirit. She didn't fully understand, but felt compelled to open up to him. "I recently learned that I may have an important connection to rivers and the cycle of life," Aiza confided, leaving out the complicated details the Riverkeeper had described. "Maybe we are meant to share that spiritual journey together someday." Kiran's intense eyes studied her with a look of wonder. "You are quite an extraordinary young woman, Aiza. I sense great power and destiny flowing through you." He gave her an enigmatic smile. Who knows what adventures might await us both on the path? Over the next few weeks, Aiza made sure to visit Kiran regularly, bringing him food and keeping him company as his injuries slowly healed. She was completely entranced by the mysterious yet charming young man. Aiza had never felt this way about any of the boys in her village. There was something almost supernatural about Kiran's charisma and presence that made her heart race. And he always seemed to share Aiza's curiosity about spirituality, the river, and her hazy inklings of cosmic importance. One warm evening, after most of the village had gone to sleep, Aiza sneaked out to visit Kiran in secret. She didn't fully understand her feelings, but she felt a strong need to be near him, as if her very soul wanted his company. Kiran was sitting outside the hut alone, looking up at the starry night sky. "Aiza," he greeted her with a slight nod. "What brings you to me under these moonlit rays?" Aiza felt her heart beat faster as he looked at her with his mesmerizing eyes. I couldn't sleep, and I hoped you might tell me more about the spiritual importance of your journey to the great western river you mentioned." Kiran smiled mysteriously and gestured for Aiza to join him. "Ah, so you wish to satisfy the spiritual yearnings of your growing goddess spirit? How lucky that our paths should cross, soulful Aiza." Aiza sat on the ground across from Kiran, hugging her knees as she listened eagerly to his rich, ringing voice. He began speaking with quiet reverence. "You see, my people believe the great mother river in the west is the source of all life, an immortal cosmic flow carrying the raw divine essence that creates and nourishes all worldly creation. We make the holy trip to bathe in her purifying waters, not just symbolically, but to be physically and spiritually cleansed, healed, and recharged by her primal energies." Kiran's gaze turned inward, becoming more intense. For someone who was born with, let's say, special gifts, like myself, this ritual holds even deeper meaning. Only by submerging and surrendering fully to the Mother River's timeless currents can I truly realign my elements and spirit with the creative cosmic flow. As a chosen conductor for these earth-shaping forces, by merging my spirit with the waters, I achieve transcendent empowerment that unlocks abilities beyond normal mortal means. Kiran spoke with rising passion and conviction. "With this divine union, I become an earthly channel for the fundamental powers of life, able to heal the sick, rejuvenate blighted lands, awaken dormant growth and abundance." He trailed off, seeming lost in fervent reverie. Aiza realized she was hanging on his every word, utterly transfixed. Perhaps it was a subconscious resonance with her own mysterious origins, calling out to the divine cosmic attributes Kiran described. "That's incredible," she murmured, equal parts awed and confused. She shuffled a bit closer to Kiran, drawn to his intensity like a moth to a flame. "I've never heard of such profound rituals. Please, tell me more." And so Kiran did tell Aiza more, sharing intricate lore, legends, and sacred rites under the twinkling stars late into the night. Aiza drank up each mystical word from the handsome stranger's lips, like someone thirsty for spiritual truth. Aiza couldn't deny how strongly she felt about Kiran. It was a deep, soulful feeling that was more than just physical attraction. She felt like their lives were meant to come together in a special, almost magical way. In the days and weeks that followed, Aiza and Kiran became very close. She helped take care of his hurt leg, bringing him food and spending long hours talking about spiritual things, nature, and finding enlightenment. "Aiza, tell me more about the dreams and feelings you have," Kiran asked one afternoon as she changed the bandages on his leg. His deep brown eyes looked at her intensely. Aziza's heart raced as she met his gaze. "I'm not sure, Kiran. Ever since the Riverkeeper talked about my destiny, it feels like something big is waking up inside me." Kiran nodded, fascinated. "I can feel the powerful forces around you, Aiza. You have the potential to bring about a great change in the world." To Aiza, Kiran's wisdom seemed to come from an eternal source. She loved spending time with him, feeling like his presence was soothing the restless feelings inside her. "Learn from me and discover the truth within you," Kiran whispered, holding her hands. "Let our spirits come together to spark your divine potential." Kiran enjoyed helping Aiza uncover her hidden powers. Each day, his charisma and teachings helped Aiza discover new strengths within herself. "You have so much untapped potential," he told her one evening as they sat under the stars. "Like a sunrise, your true power is just beginning to show." Aiza felt a strong attraction to Kiran. "Kiran," she whispered, feeling a warmth inside her. "I feel a burning desire when I'm near you. Please, show me how to connect with the cosmic energy and fulfill my yearnings." Under the stars, she gave in to the powerful emotions and spirituality she felt. They kissed passionately, feeling like their souls were coming together in a divine moment. "Yes, let our spirits ignite a new age of growth and change," Kiran said between kisses. From then on, Aziza's life was a mix of intense moments and spiritual lessons. She felt like her mind was opening up to new, deep experiences. "Feel the mother's energy flowing through me," Kiran said as they were close together. "Become the vessel for the waters of life." Aziza gave in to the strong connection she felt with Kiran. With each moment together, she felt herself waking up to a new understanding of the universe. "Oh Kiran, I can feel it, the cosmic energy inside me," she cried out in joy. In those moments, Aziza felt like she was seeing a higher realm beyond the physical world. But deep inside, she sensed something was wrong. There was a hint of danger in the powerful experiences. "Yes, drink deeper from the mother's energy," Kiran's voice echoed around her. "Only by letting go of your old self can you be reborn in her perfect image." At the peak of each intense moment, Aziza saw a shadowy presence, hinting at something bad behind the spiritual experiences. As Kiran led her deeper into these heightened states, the line between spiritual joy and danger began to blur. "Yes, give yourself fully and be reborn through the sacred destruction of your old self," a dark voice echoed. Aziza realized in brief moments that Kiran was less a man and more a guide for her destined path to cosmic unity, leading her into a mix of joy and madness. All the while, a dark presence watched, waiting hungrily. "At last the time has come," a voice whispered from the shadows. "The cycle of life I've been destroying for ages is within my reach again." Unaware of the dark path Kiran was leading her down, Aziza gave up parts of her identity, becoming a vessel for Kiran's teachings and rituals, like an endless spinning vortex.